Right, good evening folks. It has gone 6 o'clock and I am advised that we are live streaming. So welcome to the first meeting of the Civic Honours Sub-Committee tonight. This is part of the new administration's push to try and actually increase and enhance the civic pride within the borough and recognise those who have made an outstanding contribution in various different walks of life. And I'm hoping that this will be the start of a process which actually enable us to reward many more of our citizens throughout the borough. So, item 1 is the evacuation procedure. Everyone here is aware of the evacuation procedure. Item 2 is apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Watkins and Councillor Golby, and Councillor Smith is substituting for Councillor Golby. Are there any declarations of interest not printed on the agenda which are relevant to today's meeting? No. Okay, thank you very much. That then moves us on to public consultation. I'm aware of one item of public consultation from Mr. Sam Margrave, which Mr. Shardlow is going to read out.
Statement from Mr. Margrave. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've set out in the attached paper why I'm asking for the Council to develop this work. I raised this matter at the beginning of the year and I understand the Council is already working to implement my ideas. So things may have moved on. One great thing about the new administration's leadership is they are listening to local people and delivering for our community. I really hope this continues. Without doubt, in my view, local people are the best people around. We have people who give their time tirelessly to the community, councillors who have gone above and beyond, and folk who serve. What we don't do well is getting people recognised. Bedworth is the town that doesn't forget, but the council has yet to name streets after our fallen heroes, or add the 100 forgotten names to our memorial. In 2011, council disgracefully made a political decision to turn down the freedom of the borough to Jesse Owen, and to have a memorial to 2 of our fallen heroes. This must never happen again. Whether members place this item on the work programme or the council changes its approach, what matters is recognising and encouraging community service, recognising those who gave their lives, and taking the politics out of honours for the council to use its wide range of powers as other areas do to remember, recognise and reward our citizens. At the beginning of the last decade, the Lord Lieutenant of Warwickshire highlighted this at the event at the Town Hall. The council itself has powers to make community awards, but there is no dedicated policy and provision has been ad hoc, depending on whether there are awards available in the basement. Street naming not used as they could be. I do not believe anyone since 1974 has been made an alderman compared with neighbouring authorities. We also have not used the freedom of the borough as it should have been. It is a source of personal sadness we have not recognised some of our borough and town's greatest heroes. We also do not have the number of MBEs awarded as other areas. That isn't because people don't do great things, it's because we need to engage in the process. I would like to see the council do more to help residents submit nominations. The council in the past has refused to recognise people or use its powers or do more for political reasons. But I am proud of my borough and local people. I want councillors to put politics aside and recognise the outstanding achievements of our amazing residents for our community and others. So whether via this work programme or elsewhere, having discussed this with a number of councillors, I commend my idea to you and hope that the council will do all in its power to celebrate all that is done across Nuneaton and Bedworth.
Okay, thank you for reading that out, Mr. Shardlow. So we already have on the agenda about aldermen and freedom of the borough, which we will address in due course. What I intend to do under any other items is to try and flesh out some ideas about a civic scheme, a permanent civic scheme, so if members can come up with some ideas that we can then ask officers to go away and flesh our ideas out. And in answer to another point which Mr. Margrave raised, we do have to be sensitive about naming streets, particularly after people who have given their lives in service. If that is something their families wish to do, I'm sure that if they wish to bring that forward to the council, we will look on that as sympathetically as we can. But what I am aware of is that, particularly in my patch, for the Golf Drive development, road names have been suggested by the Nuneaton Historical Society about naming roads for fallen soldiers from World War I who actually lived in the Whitestone and Attleborough area, and those are ones which I was consulted on as a local ward member, and I have agreed for those to go forward. So I think it is something, if we work with third parties to help bring some of these forward, so the more historical side of things, then if the appropriate development comes forward, I'm sure that local councillors would be more than willing to be listening to those ideas. So it may be something to look at in terms of a future work programme about street naming in the borough on this, if we want to discuss that under any other business as well, about street naming as well. So we'll take that as well under item 7. So that moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is our terms of reference and establishment of the subcommittee. Phil, do you want to take that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is, in effect, there's only one issue that on this item that you need to consider, and that is the terms of reference for this subcommittee. When this was approved by Council, it's a requirement that those terms of reference will then be submitted to Cabinet for formal approval. So it's Appendix B to the report. There is a set of proposals. They're based basically on the report that went to Council. And it's really for this subcommittee to decide, does it want to add anything to them, take anything out, play with them a little bit, maybe to make them a little bit more as intended. So really it's for you, Chair, and the subcommittee to decide that, and then ultimately it'll be a recommendation then on to Cabinet to then sign those off. That's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So we have on Appendix B at page 10 some suggested terms of reference for the subcommittee. Does anyone have any comments they wish to make on that? I mean, I'm happy to move it for discussion from the chair, if anyone wishes to second that. Councillor Tromans, thank you. Does any member wish to speak on this? Councillor Tromans?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wholeheartedly support this. We mention the elected members, MPs, charities and other borough organisations, but most importantly members of the public that can nominate. And I think it needs to be as open and as transparent and as wide as possible going forward, particularly for honours that aren't, purely borough-based. Stuff that is has some national recognition because it's in the 1972 Local Government Act, like people being older persons of the borough or free or getting the freedom of the borough. So yeah, I very much support this. I should touch on at this point, because it will inform our discussions later, what we're doing on an informal basis. It was referred to as, awards have been very ad hoc and few and far between in the past. And I think under this administration, we haven't wanted that to be the case, which is why the leader and the cabinet have been quite keen to bring this forward. And we've had a letter of support, as was read out earlier. In the meantime, the one thing that we can say is we are underrepresented in national honours. The Lord Lieutenant's made that quite clear, that just not getting the level of referrals through to them. But what I've learnt from being mayor in just a few months is that is absolutely not because we don't have people in this borough, in this area, that are doing really great things. We do. We have people that give so much of their time and of themselves into things to serve their community. And so I'm very, very pleased that this is being brought forward, because obviously as we look at the nominations, there's an opportunity there also to refer onwards for people who may receive honours at a national level. In the meantime, the little that we can do, we are doing in terms of the mayoralty, and that is to give out borough badges. And where we've had people nominated, where we've had people that have come forward and said, this person has done this for such a long time, or we've met during the course of the mayoralty people that have done something really special. You know, I gave an award to somebody who'd just stepped down at the age of 80 from being chair of a charity in the area after giving more than 40 years service, devoted service to that. And so it was a privilege to give them a little borough badge, which is the bottom of the crest, the 3 ribbons, Nuneaton, Bedworth, Bulkington, on a green badge, beautifully made, little lapel badge, and a certificate that we've got the Mace Bearer to produce for them and that I put in a frame and hand over. You know, it's done very quietly. We don't make a big song and dance about it because some of these people are very private and they're not looking for rewards or honours so much. They're doing good because they want to do it. But it's nice to be able to recognise that. It's nice to be able to say to people that spend all their time, you know, geeing others up and getting them motivated and thanking others, for us as a borough to stop and pause and say, well, actually, who's thanking you? Let me or them as the mayor or mayoress thank you on behalf of the borough for what you're doing. And that's why we've been giving out a handful of those, because we've only got a relatively small number. And we'll be giving out some more, obviously, during the mayoralty. But it would be great to formalise that, to have a structure around it, to embed that in part of the local borough honours system, so that there were borough badges and then there were older persons and then the ability to get the highest honour that any borough can bestow, which is freedom of the borough. And also, as I said, to be able to collect in names that we can refer onwards to the lieutenancy. So I absolutely support this. And yeah, it will be great to get it going and great to get it going as soon as we can next year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tromans. Any other member? Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I don't disagree too much with Councillor Tromans, just some slightly more practical points that come to mind. I'm pretty much, I'm very happy with the stakeholder consultations in point 1. The only thing that springs to mind is, do we want to consider the mechanism for consulting with stakeholders? Is it going to be a case of we proactively go and consult them on a rota timetable basis? Have you got any nominations for awards? Or do we just have an open-ended mechanism that they can submit to? And that sort of leads into my other point, is that I think this will probably connect to the timetable for the committee as we work that out. But are we going to have a timetable for awarding honours? So the National Honours System awards twice a year. Do we want to do that for the borough honours? Do we want to consider, if I presume later on in this meeting we're going to consider creating a local civic award, whatever that ends up being. Do you want to do that biannually? Do you want to do that quarterly? So we probably want to include that in the terms of reference. And on point 2, the criteria for the honours. Now, it's pretty much up to us, I would assume, what we want to award. But I think is slightly implicit in that. There's also, in the report, they're talking about statutory or national criteria. So I presume there's certain check boxes you have to fill, as in you've not been a criminal or you've shown due diligence or whatever it is. Could we have, and I don't know if Director Richardson could procure this for us, some draft copies of what the national criteria are or what the statutory criteria are, because if they all have to meet the Nolan principles or whatever they're called. So that might be quite useful as we think about what we're doing. But that was my thoughts, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. In terms of mechanism, some things are statutory. I'll bring you in a minute, Councillor Tromans. Some things are statutory anyway, so the criteria or mission statement of like honorary alderman or freedom of the borough, that is set out in statute anyway, and it's our interpretation of that. I think when it comes to a civic honours scheme for Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, that would be for us to set some criteria, and I think that's what I want to try and get to in point 7. What we're discussing here is the broad framework for that. In terms of timelines, having done some research on other councils, when I did ask for those links to be sent out to all the members, they do tend to set different timelines for different awards. I mean, it may be, for example, thinking off the top of my head, that for civic awards, having awards in April might be more beneficial because that would be the last month of a mayor's term. So you would hopefully have got to know a great range of people by that point. And we asked for nominations from the start of the new year, and you worked that out. So I think we have to backtrack from where we want to come from, where we want to get to, and work out the timeline from there. Before I bring the others back in, there were just 2 amendments that I would like to suggest for the draft terms of reference, which would be under point 3, that we add naming conventions for streets and buildings. That might be something that we could do a piece of work on for that. And also add an extra point. I think this would just be for clarification so that no one thinks that we're doing it underhand, but I think any consideration of national honours would have to be in private session, because the recipient is not supposed to know if they are actually nominated for a national honour. Having looked into this at work, it's a big no-no to tell someone that they have actually been put forward to the Cabinet Office. So if we are to do that piece of work, and I'm not against doing that, I think we would have to, in fairness, not to raise expectations, do that in closed session. So if we could word that appropriately in the terms of reference, just so that everyone knows why we would be going into private session for those issues. So I'm happy to move those 2 amendments, if anyone wishes. Councillor Croft has just seconded them. But I had Councillor Tromans wanting to come back in, then Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Chair. I wholeheartedly would support what you've just suggested there. They seem like very sensible amendments to me. I very much agree with Councillor Croft, who made some very good points about the detail of this. And I think that is quite important for us to look at that. Just as you mentioned, adding under Section 3, the road naming convention, absolutely. I think that's something that's way overdue, and I'm so glad you've acceded to those requests for the new development in Whitestone, for the fallen from Attleborough and Whitestone. And as you will recall, we did have an approach from St John Ambulance and myself and Councillor Evans, through your good self, did arrange for a road to be named in Bedworth in due course in respect of that. So, we've made a good start, but formalising it would be the right way forward. I do love the idea of the Civic Honours being given out at a big awards ceremony. I would just say that once a year, maybe April, whatever, it does sound like it would be a great celebration for the borough and those involved. The only thing I'd say is there may be people who are quite shy, who are a bit wary about accepting an honour, and particularly in that kind of glare of publicity and everything. And so I think we should retain the option to maybe, for the Mayor to be able to, with the agreement of this subcommittee, do some of those awards. And indeed, I think until we've actually got this all established and it's gone through Cabinet and Council, we'll just have to stick with what we're doing for now, because I wouldn't want anyone to miss out in the interim. But that was the only thing I just wanted to say about the actual awards timing. The other awards, the honorary aldermen, it makes sense to do that once or twice a year. I can see that. But freedom of the borough is a very rare thing, as was pointed out by Mr. Margrave, who wrote in. There's a book on the Mayor's desk, and the pages for the last 30, 40 years have got nothing in. We just, we need to reinstate that. But it is likely, after we've identified perhaps a couple of individuals or whoever that should rightly have been offered to before, I don't anticipate that being a very regular thing. It is such a prestigious honour, and the notable people that are in there from the past, and that we could probably think of to refer that it's overdue to be offered to. I can't imagine that we're going to get people that would have qualified for freedom of the borough cropping up, every quarter or every 6 months or even annually. I think, the public expectation should be, not that it only happens every 40 years like has happened in the last one, but that it happens, kind of as and when for somebody very special. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tromans. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify my point from earlier, when I talk about a mechanism, I don't mean the mechanism of award, because we know, for example, how to create an alderman, it's 2/3 of the councillors. What I mean is the mechanism for suggestion of names. So, for example, do we want to do it quite passively and have a suggestion form on the website that anybody can add a name into in a reason at any point, or do you want to do it quite actively and occasionally send out an email or a letter to the stakeholders and say, do you know anybody? We've got the awards coming up who you'd like to submit names for, and that was what I was driving at, so I should clarify that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. From looking on websites, it seems that there's a mixture for different councils, that some just invite a rolling basis and some have some deadlines which they set, so have them in by this point because we do our awards at X date. And I think when we come to any other business, when we try and flesh out what we ask officers to do for our own civic award, I think we can perhaps give that some more thought on that one. Indeed we can. We can always bank them for future meetings as well, and give them a push through the comms team at dedicated times, which should be fairly simple. So, but with those amendments to the suggested terms of reference, are we all happy to move to the vote and approve them? All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That then moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is the appointment of honorary aldermen or alderwomen and honorary freemen or free women. Do you want to take that one, Phil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And this follows on from the last item. Obviously, the legislation is fairly clear. There is a process. It's set out in the report. It does require an extraordinary council, and the suggested approach that some authorities take, which we would advocate here, is that we would tie it in with an ordinary meeting of the council and follow on with an extraordinary, or proceed it to simplify matters in terms of getting all members there. The awards themselves, obviously an alderman is a former councillor, so the expectation is that it'll be in connection with their service as a councillor, whereas the freeman or free woman, it's about service to the area generally, and as Councillor Tromans has rightly said, it's one of those which is used sparingly because you are looking at exceptional performance locally. So it's there, Chair, in terms of the report. It's really for noting, and then whether or not you wish to consider the process, as Councillor Croft has said, as to how you want to move that forward with nominations, whether you want a process, etc. That's really now down to you as a subcommittee to work out how you want to move that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. So there are 2 recommendations before us, and I will move an amendment to this in due course. But from my perspective, I see this as an opportunity to kickstart the revival of the civic pride and civic honours process, because it's something relatively quick that we can do. There is an established process for this. It is a great shame, as Mr. Margrave highlighted in his opening statement, that this has not been used at all for individuals since this Borough Council's inception, and I think it is something that we can rectify pretty quickly. And also, it does not miss my attention that because we are now in December and it will be 2022 by the time any of this happens, but it would also be quite nice to coincide with the Platinum Jubilee as well in the 70th year of Her Majesty's reign. And it can be relatively inexpensive to do these events as a suitably drafted and quality certificate with a frame with the seal of the council attached, and a modest presentation ceremony, I think, can be arranged as well. So recommendation 2.1 is that we note the contents of the report, and 2.2 is very much designed to be a rolling process, so that if a nomination comes forward, then this subcommittee, if we don't already have something penciled in as part of our works, can be convened to consider any potential nominations from group leaders for any of the statutory, shall I call them, awards on that basis. But I would also like to kick off the process of doing this. So I have some nominations which I would like to move as recommendations 2.3, and that we consider the nominations for aldermen of Nuneaton and Bedworth of former councillors Don Jakes, Alan Farnell, Gerald Smith, David Carr and Diana Hawkes, All of these will be subject to their acceptance, of course. Some informal approaches have already been made where we are aware of that. In moving the alderman, I would say that Don Jakes is the epitome of public service to this borough. Not only has he served a number of terms at both the borough and the county council, but he literally put his life on the line for, back then, probably king and queen and country. He was a very well-respected teacher, shop owner, bookshop owner, and latterly a trustee of King Edward College. But something I think he would also be most proud of is his involvement with the Royal British Legion and the Poppy Appeal, and he has been a stalwart of that. And I can think of no finer former member of this council than him for that award, and of course a former mayor of this borough. In moving Alan Farnell, it is often forgotten, even though he was leader of the county council and not this council, he was for a number of years a borough councillor, leader of the opposition, but he has led the Conservative groups at both borough and county. He has been leader of the council, and he put Warwickshire and Nuneaton and Bedworth on the national stage during his time of over 30 years on the council alone, to my knowledge. He was elected in 1987 until 2013, and in the 70s and 80s he was on Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, often part of a band of 3 Conservative councillors, and I know both of us, Councillor Tromans, know how that feels. Gerald Smith, or Mr Goldtop as he is known in Weddington, is a former milkman in the area, but also a distinguished mayor and councillor on this authority, and he did a lot during his time on the authority for Mary and Evans Hospice, and he was a great constituency champion, and I believe is more than deserving of that accolade. And former councillor David Carr, who now spends most of his retirement advocating for patients at the George Eliot Hospital, and did so with his time on the council, and also involved in the Neighbourhood Watch as well. So again, I think another worthy recipient. And Diana Hawkes, a former mayor and mayoress of this borough, but also not as well known. She is a former long-standing magistrate in this neck of the woods, and I think if she is willing to accept the honour, then she is someone of high integrity who I would be able to support for the position of alderman. And I would also like to move, subject to their acceptance, for the freeman or woman of the borough, Garung, MBE. In many respects needs no introduction. If you have met him, you will certainly know him. But he has made Nuneaton his life and his home. He has dedicated his time to the ex-servicemen's community and in improving their lives and the lives of the borough. And he is a gentleman in the truest sense of the word, in my view. And I think he would really appreciate being acknowledged by his adopted hometown. And also Jean Whittaker, MBE. And I should have said Don Jakes, BEM, actually. But Jean Whittaker, MBE, has spent a lifetime fundraising for the George Eliot Hospital. And the George Eliot Hospital has proven to be the focal point during this crisis, and helping ensure it continues and provides all the little add-ons which she fought so hard for, I think is also worthy of freedom of this borough. So those are my recommendations as amended, so 2.1, 2.2 and those nominations. Does that receive a seconder? Oh, I've got Councillor Croft, Councillor Tromans and Councillor Smith all seconding, so I can take it that that is an approved recommendation to go through.
Clearly no dissent.
Does any member wish to speak on any of those? Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely 100% agree with all of those nominations. I think that just speaks to the wonderful people that we have in the borough, and that it's high time we started to recognise them and the great work they've done. I'm only a bit sad that there are people that have passed and the opportunity is now gone. And they are from across the political divide, but they've passed, and so we don't want to lose these opportunities again. And so, again, I'm just thrilled that we're moving it forward, and that we're moving it forward quickly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Tromans. And speaking about people who are no longer with us, I think we can all name some. I mean, Bill Olner, regardless of our political persuasion, he would have been a candidate for potentially both of those awards, in my view. Regardless of our politics, he was a man of Nuneaton and Bedworth, and he championed our town as it was for the Nuneaton constituency, but also as a former leader of the council and mayor of the borough, and setting up the Mary Evans Hospice during his mayoral year. And also former councillor Neil College, who spent a long time on this authority, former councillor for Whitestone, would have been someone who I would have loved to have given the honour to, because Nuneaton and Bedworth was his life, and I think he would have really enjoyed that honour. So we've approved those recommendations to go forward. So that will now go to Brent as Head of Paid Service to convene an extraordinary council. That moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is any other items. And I've identified 2 other items for this, which is our own Civic Honours scheme and also a street naming convention, and building convention, I should say, as well, or policy. If we take the Civic Honours scheme first, does anyone... Well, if I set out that I did actually send out to all members, or officers did on my behalf, some examples of nearby and far away councils with Civic Honours schemes. There seems to be 2 schools of thought, one about defined categories, or one which is more generic, about their contribution to the community as a whole, which is more all-encompassing. So I would be interested to hear members' views on which way to go, because I think starting from scratch is an exciting opportunity, but also presents a number of headaches. Councillor Chomans.
Thank you, Chair. I can tell you that so far, the certificates that have been issued just say for service to the borough or the community. And I think from the research that we've all done, and I looked at all of those sites and some other ones, it did appear that they weren't very accessible because some of them were very narrow criteria. There were 3 or 4 different categories for some local authorities. Yeah, if people are doing good out there in the community, let's not quibble. If they're doing good, they're doing great for our borough, and we should and their community, and we should recognise that. So I think keeping it simple is probably the right way to go. If people just think a business or an individual or somebody is doing, or people are doing, great service for their community, they just simply need to let us know. And to Councillor Crosspoint and yours earlier about the nominations, do we go out there formally, or do we just rely on people, to send them in? I think we do both. We remind people that, there will be a ceremony at a time of the year, but if they've got other people they want to nominate, we can consider those in the meantime as well. And we do remind people, and it's great that, it'd be something really positive for comms to put out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chomans. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree with that point. I think that you don't want to restrict yourself too much. So if you get to 1 quarter and we have a committee meeting and we've got several nominees for great service to business, but no nominees for service to the environment or something, we don't want to be scratching around looking for people to fill a particular category. So I would suggest having quite a broad award for civic pride or civic service or something, and then having suggested, but only suggested, nomination criteria. So local business, civic pride, cleaning up the borough, community support, however we want to go. And on that second point, would it be in order then to request that, for example, IT set up a page on the website with a submission form, and so that people can, throughout the year, nominate people that can then feed through into this committee?
Okay, thank you. So I think we have agreement over the broad mission statement of what we want to do. So something which has enhanced the live, work or visit aspect of the borough community. So whether it be enhancing our social lives, our business community, the third sector, etc. I think officers should be able to find a suitable form of words to encapsulate that broad mission statement. Is there agreement that we will do this on a rolling basis, but that we would have an expected presentation towards the end of the incumbent's mayoral year, subject to, I mean, in case they want a home visit or whatever, or they aren't capable even of coming in, because that's possible. You might just have to go with your chains to the house or a housing complex, etc. I think that would also round off a mayor's year quite nicely as well. But obviously, if there is, you could do an ad hoc presentation if necessary, but it would depend where you are in the year. So if you've got loads already by, I don't know, month 3 or 4 of the year, you could always look at putting on something extra. But I think one of the things we need to consider is a name. If anyone has any suggestions for that, Councillor Tromans.
I think any mayor would be proud to go and bestow the honour at somebody's home or hospice or wherever they may be. So I think that's no problem. And it's great that, you know, I think we've reached a consensus that it should be a very broad award. In terms of the award, I mean, we could stay with the borough badge, because, you know, it is on the certificate. It just says, you know, for service to the community, and the badge isn't referred to, but it is off the seal, done, you know, the letters patent by the College of Heraldry for the charter for the borough. There is the crest, and at the bottom there is the seal, and that's what's on the badges. The little green bit at the bottom with the 3 ribbons, and I think keeping with that might be, you know, a nice way to go. There haven't been very many issued out. The only thing I would say about keeping the option open to give some out to people who may not want to chair a large gathering, and we wouldn't want anybody to be put off purely just because of their modesty, is that I had a group of 3 people come with their immediate families, and actually that's quite a large group, and for one of them that was, you know, I think if it had been a larger gathering they probably would have foregone the award. So doing a couple of those on the way through, but certainly an opportunity for a larger gathering once a year would be great for the borough, and appreciated by any mayor, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Croft. Thank you, Councillor.
On that, thank you, Chair. I suppose the rolling programme will be driven by A, demand, and B, how often this committee meets. Because if we nominate people in, say, June, it's an awfully long time to wait till then April. So that's why I raised the prospect of potentially biannually, like the National Honours Scheme, the Royal Honours. And I absolutely agree with the point about ad hoc presentations. I think that's fine. So it would very much depend how many meetings we want to have. So that committee probably needs to consider that.
Well, I think the number of meetings we have outside of our work programme about looking at the policies, etc., or any freedom or honorary alderman nominations will be dictated by the number of nominations that we actually receive. And I'm sure that if officers tell us we have a backlog accruing, that we can always organise something. It's always nice to have a backlog than a paucity of nominations. But I think we need to have a name which is meaningful for residents to actually buy into as well. I quite like the Coventry concept of an award of merit, that they were actually people of merit within our borough. So a borough award of merit or something like that, and that the actual award can be the badge if that's what we have a supply of, etc. So Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Award of Merit could be something. I don't know whether that's just thinking off the top of my head. I thought that was quite nice. It was actually putting someone forward to say that what you have done is above and beyond with the merit. So the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Award of Merit. Councillor Tromans.
I will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Tromans. We've given you a lot of steers. Is there anything else you need us to steer you with on coming up with our own Civic Honours policy?
Well, we'll have to work around the mission statement and
Yeah.
and work that out. But no, I think, you know, we'll liaise with you directly anyway, Chris. So
Okay. We have a good starter for 10 there. So if we can work that up and bring the draft to another meeting of this panel, we can approve that for then referral on to Cabinet and presumably full council for approval.
yeah.
Okie
But
dokie.
actually, Chair, this is going it'll be Cabinet, won't it, that would approve it?
Yeah.
As a subcommittee cabinet, but obviously if you wanted to have it as a borough award, then yes, then cabinet could refer it on to full council as a...
I think it would be better to have it approved by full council so it becomes a formal policy of full council. And I think that also sends a signal of intent to the residents that this is something that we attach great weight to. And also there may be some minor financial implications with badges, etc. So I think having council approval would be good for that. Councillor Tromans.
Yeah, actually, Jan, we want to amend the Constitution, don't we? Do we? Do we want to put a slight revision in there?
It does have in the Constitution about free men and free women. Could that be included as a subsection?
That's what I meant, sorry. Yes.
Turn that on for the public. So that brings us on to street and building naming policy or convention. I think it has been a convention of this council that they don't name anything after a living person, but I don't see any reason why there couldn't be something for certainly for those who are deceased or who have been of merit to the council, but also it may be that we could, if they have given exceptional service to the borough or the country, someone who is living. So I think theoretically, theoretically under the established protocol of the council, if we wanted to name something after Her Majesty the Queen because she's living, we couldn't theoretically do that under the old convention. But I think if it was someone who is meritorious and distinguished either on a local or national stage, I don't see why we shouldn't honour those people in the street naming or building naming conventions. Councillor Tromans.
Absolutely, and you know, you gave a perfect example there. There are people that we might wish to honour. Typically, roads has never really been an issue because I think you've always, you know, kind of been able to do that in people's life, even if it wasn't done by the council, if it was put forward by former landowners or something. So, but buildings, people tend to insert the word memorial in it if it's the so-and-so memorial wing or building or whatever, precisely to denote that they're past, rather than with us, where we may want to provide it to somebody living. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. I definitely think we should, you know, be able to adopt the naming convention for anybody, whatever the status, whether they're historic or contemporary or whatever. Thank you.
Any other member? No? So does that give you a flavour for how the committee views it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It does. I mean, what I would say is that we are, we'll need to bring back to you a policy for particularly, not so much buildings, but certainly street naming. And the reason I say that is that street naming is subject to an appeal process. So if somebody objects to a name, they can take the council, to the magistrates' court for the magistrates' court to actually make that decision. Curiously enough, it doesn't happen very often, but I've had the pleasure of having to do that. So it's something just to be aware of, that there is that sort of, if you like, check and balance in the process that we need to be cognizant of. So it does strengthen the case if the policy is clear, because then the magistrates will have regard to that when considering the matter.
Thank you, Phil. And I never knew that there was an appeal process for that, so you live and learn every day. But as long as you've got a steer to go with that we can bring to a future meeting, I think I'm happy with that. That brings to an end the AOB that I was aware of. Does anyone else have any AOB to raise? No. In terms of a date of next meeting then, shall we look for February time? Roughly 2 months, which will give you enough time to put those things together. Everyone happy with that? Okay, in which case I shall say thank you very much everyone for your attendance. I think we've actually made a good start tonight, and have a safe trip home. Thank you. Can you